I've made a new room in the Scary Random Room network. It's called the Iceberg room. And I decided to make an iceberg chart in Minecraft called the Super Donkey 64 Iceberg. Super Donkey 64 was a game that came out back in 2002 for the Playgon console. And it's very popular for its adult humor, violence, and it was a 3D game, so those were kind of popular at the time. But here is an iceberg chart. We'll be going underwater and above water for all of the information, theories, and stuff on the matter. And let's get started. Diving on land. So when you play as Zero or Larva, you can do a diving glitch where when you dive into water, but while in midair go into land at the last second, you can basically do a really weird and funny looking glitch where the character is still doing the diving animation and you basically go faster. Other times the model will go back to normal, but you still have that weird jumping animation whenever you jump. And the only way to get rid of it is to dive into the water and in any level and basically just get back out normally. Infinite wall jumping. In some levels you can wall jump on some structures, and basically there's usually a meter to where you run out of energy and you can no longer keep wall jumping, but sometimes this meter is glitched in some areas. I'm not sure how it is, but you can wall jump all the way up to the top of the building or structure wherever you are. But of course this only works in some areas of the game. Larva is unstable, so the other character Larva, throughout the game it's lightly implied that Larva is not all there or is a little bit crazy. Sometimes in his idle animations you can see his eye twitching or his head twitching. So yeah, Zero is a professional bully. Not much to say about this one. Zero just, is good at bullying people. Makes him a great character. Well, that's kind of part of his character, not really much else to say. So, yeah. Larva created by Purple Shadows. So, in one of the later games, the Scary Random Room Network, there's an entity called the Purple Shadows, and it's basically Larva's origin, that he was created by the Purple Shadows. And throughout the game, in only a few areas in the game, we get a reference to like a purple ghost-like figure. This might be a foreshadowing of the Purple Shadows themselves, even though the Scary Random Room Network came out 13 years after Super Donkey 64. Okay, now, glitched NPCs. Sometimes at night, when you see people walking, sometimes for some reason, depending on how you move your camera, their body parts like stretch significantly off of this, like into the sky or just off screen, while most of their body is just normal and still walking. But it's still really weird though. The game isn't the most stable in the world, and it does have a few glitches that happen every now and then. Zero's heroin. So, if you go into Zero's house, you will see a lab of some sort and needles on the ground, and well, you can probably put it together from there. I think in the game, somewhere in the dialogue, it is implied that Zero does do drugs. And well, it is an adult game, so yeah. Out of bounds rooms. So a few glitches can be exploited so where you can get outside of the map, and there are quite a lot of rooms that went unused and are just floating there or connected to a building underground, and some of them, most of them, are actually empty or at least have a couple objects in them, but most of them have very little significance. And since there's so many of them, that's probably why they're well known. And since the game is pretty glitchy sometimes, that also is probably why it's well known. I don't know, I just find it weird that some of the glitches are very well known. This is only the top of the iceberg. Now things are starting to get darker, so I'm gonna have to drink night vision. Circus tent burn down. So basically, in the game, you can use your lighter to set certain things on fire. Most of the buildings you cannot burn down, but the circus tent has a very interesting burn down animation, and you can probably guess why. It's a giant tent. And when you go inside, it's absolutely desolate, and it just seems like all the people that were in there somehow got out on time. Some people say you can find burnt corpses, but strangely enough, this is very rare. Unused animal models. So in the files, there are a few animals that just went unused. In Super Donkey 64, sometimes you can find animals wandering around, but you do not really encounter them that often. And yeah, that's about it. It's a shame that the other animal models weren't used. Zero's ice more powerful in ice levels. Uh, I thought this would be obvious, but yeah, Zero's ice powers are slightly more powerful in the ice-themed levels and in the colder areas of the city that you're in. And yeah, that's about it. Alright, I think it is time to go underwater. Slight Christian messages. Slight Christian messages. There's a couple churches throughout the city, some of which have gatherings, and some of the main characters, might refer to Christianity or God or something holy or heavenly like. But other than that, that's pretty much it. So, there you go. Abandoned buildings. Throughout the city, you will find warehouses and office buildings and other tall buildings and houses that just don't have any activity or anything in them at all. I think this is because during the time you couldn't have a lot of NPCs running around, otherwise the game would lag up significantly. A lot of the buildings are actually abandoned though, and they just don't look abandoned. Wait, let me say that again. A lot of the buildings actually are not abandoned, but there are a lot of abandoned buildings in some parts. Figure and distance. Some players report seeing a pitch-black humanoid in the distance in Context City, and sometimes he even appears in levels that you play. However, he has only been seen in Context City. This is just a hidden feature, Easter egg of some kind that I'm pretty sure is just meant to scare people. If you try approaching the figure, it just disappears. And he only appears for a couple seconds in the first place. Originally 100 levels. So the game was originally planned to have 100 levels, and well, that was cut out because there just wasn't enough space for it. So there's only about 50 if you count the 10 extra levels that are rather kind of small. Parental complaints / riots. So when Super Donkey 64 was first released, it looked like a kid's game, and I believe that a lot of parents were deceived by it and bought it for their kids, even though they shouldn't have and should have read the rating on it. And basically this caused kind of an uproar by a lot of parents. Some people say there were riots, but I don't think that was true. There's no evidence. There is video surveillance of the developer's studio, and the only thing they found were just a few vandalizers, some of which probably weren't even involved in the parental complaints. Other characters and files. So originally there was going to be a couple more characters you could play as in Super Donkey 64, not just Zero and Larva. They had, I believe there are models of Ponage, Dixon, Auditor, and I think that's it. There might be a couple more. There are parts, like just small parts, suggesting they may belong to other characters, such as Feces and etc. But that's about it. It would be cool if we could play as the other characters, though. Real life gun pictures. In the files, there are pictures of actual guns. People say that the pictures of the guns were actually going to be used as the actual texture of the guns that you use in the game, but that doesn't seem to be true if you look at the real gun textures. Original build in 90s. So basically there's kind of a theory floating around that Super Donkey 64 started in the early 90s as, you know, a prototype and basically went through a long development process before finally coming out. It's been confirmed that they started in about 1998 and worked from there, as 3D was still new at the time. So they had a lot of trouble making it, and the developers were not that experienced. So it did take surprisingly not a lot of years to make Super Donkey 64, but I guess the very early versions of it started in the 90s. But the late 90s, not the early 90s. Original Larva. So in Super Donkey 64, Larva is a black and white tuxedo cat with the same crystal-like pointed tail that shoots out poison and venom like the larva we have today. And the redesign of Larva is more insect-like, and he's a sand color instead of black and white, and he doesn't have fur, and he has more of an exoskeleton. And the developers confirmed that this is actually a different larva, so this implies that there's actually two different larvas, but basically people are saying, what happened to the first one? What happened to, the black and white tuxedo cat? That's that's very interesting to know what happened to the other larva. Context City and Kaz connections. So the Scary Random Room Network is in a world called Kaz, which is basically connected to the planet that Context City is on. And uh, throughout the Scary Random Room Network, there are a few props and items that you would find in Context City. And throughout the games that have Context City, including Super Donkey 64, they have the same, very similar objects and props that you find in the Scary Random Room Network. I wouldn't say that's hard evidence though, because the developers could just reuse certain assets and props. Clowns. So in Super Donkey 64, sometimes you can find clown NPCs walking around, and they seem to act very strangely, like pacing and weird head movements, and just doing normal clown things like pulling out a horn and honking it. But the weird thing is that a lot of the clowns just uh, do these weird behaviors in dark places like alleys and underneath bridges. And I kind of have a theory that the the AI wasn't fully finished, so the clowns just go in random places and do their clowny activities, and the AI doesn't tell them to go to a specific place. And also, whenever the clowns appear, you see them in the distance. They're never near you at first, which is kind of strange, but I mean, a lot of NPCs spawn far away at first, so it looks like they don't, appear immediately. Okay. Okay, we are going even deeper now.